Welcome to Legal Briefs. I'm Wes Austin. I'm a lawyer keeping you updated on the latest legal news. Today we're going to be talking about the Equality Act, H.R. 5, that was recently passed by the House and it's currently in the Senate, and we're going to be looking at a few of the provisions that have people worried. All right, so let's look at page 1 of the Equality Act. It's H.R. 5, the 117th Congress first session. And it says here that the act is to prohibit discrimination on the basis of sex, gender identity, and sexual orientation, and for other purposes. All right, maybe that's a tip-off that there are other things buried in this bill besides just the anti-discrimination provisions that it talks about. Maybe, maybe not. We'll find out. So if we look at section 1, we see that the short title of this bill is the Equality Act. So we probably don't even need to look at anything else because, Congress has said, hey, this is the Equality Act. What could go wrong? All right, but let's look at it anyway, just in case there's something to see. So generally, what is the Equality Act, or H.R. 5, trying to do? It's trying to amend the Civil Rights Act of 1964 so that it includes sexual orientation and transgender status. Just by way of example, let's take one provision of the Civil Rights Act and look at it and show you how this act is trying to amend that, okay? So looking at this provision, the prohibition against discrimination or segregation in places of public accommodation, again, this is from the Civil Rights Act of 1964. All persons shall be entitled to the full and equal enjoyment of the goods, services, facilities, privileges, and advantages and accommodations of any place of public accommodation as defined in this section without discrimination or segregation on the ground of race, color, religion, or national origin. Okay, so what the Equality Act wants to do is before this or national origin, right before that, it wants to insert sex, including sexual orientation and gender identity, right before that. So some say this part of the Equality Act is basically trying to codify the United States Supreme Court decision last summer, Bostock v. Clayton County, where the United States Supreme Court held that sex discrimination in employment also prohibited such discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and transgender status. So from that decision, basically the United States Supreme Court had already changed the Civil Rights Act so that it included sexual orientation and transgender status. So if the Bostock decision already changed the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to include sexual orientation and transgender status, then why do we need the Equality Act? That's what some people are wondering. And I think some of these other provisions are what they're really looking at. It seems like maybe some of these other provisions are really what the focus is, since those other statuses have already been included into the Civil Rights Act. When the United States Supreme Court was writing this decision, I think it was Justice Gorsuch, they had to know that there were going to be a lot of people that were concerned that this was going to harm religious rights. And Justice Gorsuch tried to address that in the opinion, and he actually said, hey, everybody relax. You still have the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, also known as RFRA, not reefer, but RFRA. So those concerned with religious rights, Justice Gorsuch said, don't worry, RFRA will help protect you, okay? So what the House Democrats did in the Equality Act was just said that the RFRA Act does not apply at all in this situation. So, yeah. That seemed pretty heavy-handed, to be honest, to just take an act like that had been around for years and years and to just say, okay, we know the Supreme Court said that will help protect you, so that's why we're going to kill it. And that's basically what they tried to do, or what they're trying to do in the Equality Act. So where did we get this Religious Freedom Restoration Act? Okay, probably some ultra conservative right-wing politician, right? Let's see. Chuck Schumer. So Chuck Schumer actually introduced the bill in 1993, and then it was signed into law by Bill Clinton. So Obviously, we need to get rid of it, right? So the Equality Act basically gets rid of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act if there is ever a claim being made under the Equality Act. Okay, so if you're ever talking about any of the subject matter of this Equality Act, RFRA, gone, all right? Here's the language specifically. The Religious Freedom Restoration Act shall not provide a claim concerning or a defense to a claim under a covered title or provide a basis for challenging the application or enforcement of a covered title. Okay? So, anything with respect to the Equality Act, RFRA does not apply. That's what they're trying to do here. The one thing that the Supreme Court said specifically, this will really help protect religious freedoms and rights in this area. Let's get rid of it. Now, there is another provision that's causing some concern in the Equality Act. Let's go ahead and look at the language from it. With respect to gender identity, an individual shall not be denied access to a shared facility, including a restroom, a locker room, and a dressing room that is in accordance with the individual's gender identity. I know some guys are out there thinking, okay, wait a minute, so I'm in the locker room and a biological woman comes in who identifies as a man, and so she starts to change in there. What's the problem? I don't see what the problem is. Now, that's not what we're really talking about. What we're talking about is if you happen to be in a woman's locker room or changing room, and then someone who is a biological male walks in but identifies as a female, and she starts to change, you could have some concerns with respect to women's privacy and safety in those kind of situations. And that is one of the areas that people are voicing concern with this particular provision. Now, another concern that comes up with one of the provisions in the Equality Act comes from the definition of sex. It says that the term sex includes a sex stereotype and pregnancy, childbirth, or a related medical condition. Now, we have federal agencies and courts that have already construed that terminology, related medical condition, to include abortions. So if you look at the language from the Equality Act and the way they've changed the definition here with sex, it seems like if someone refused to perform an abortion, it might be looked at as a form of pregnancy discrimination, which would be a form of illegal discrimination on the basis of sex under some of this language. I'm not going to get into all the laws with respect to abortion. All I'm going to say is that is an area of law which is highly controversial. We have many, many cases that have argued about abortion. Many laws have tried to have been passed about abortion. There are just tons of things going on with respect to that topic, and I would think that people drafting this bill would have been more careful to just say, let's not try to slip something in with respect to this procedure, because it is so hotly contested and you've had so much litigation and legislation, and just there's so much history in that one term. If that was meant to be slipped in, that just... All right, those are some thoughts on the Equality Act. As of today, it hasn't passed in the Senate. From what I'm reading, I don't think people think that it will garner the 60 votes necessary in the Senate to pass. So possibly they'll be working on some amendments to address some of the concerns that people are having. Anyway, I will try to keep you posted. Thanks for watching.